Hi, my name is Vivi. I'm back. And for my today's children's book that I'll be reading, it's going to be based on Nelson Mandela. And the name of the book is Champion of Freedom, Remarkable People by Simon Rose. And that's what the cover of the book looks like. Who is Nelson Mandela? Hi, Mariah. You want to come say hi?
No, Mommy.
Yes? Mariah, yes. You don't want to come?
No.
Okay, I'll see you later then, okay? Okay. Sorry. She's the reason I'm doing this. Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa on May 10th, 1994, after spending almost 27 years in prison for his political activism. In the 1960s, Mandela had been a leading member of the African National Congress, ANC. This group fought against apartheid in South Africa. Mandela's fight for black freedom led to his imprisonment in 1964. Even in prison, Mandela was a powerful symbol of the anti-apartheid movement to people worldwide. After his release from prison in 1990, Mandela worked with F.W. de Klerk, South Africa's president, to end apartheid peacefully. For their efforts, the men were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. Shortly after winning this award, Mandela was elected to be president of South Africa. He stayed in this position until his retirement in 1999. Nelson Mandela has always believed in a free society where people live together in harmony. His struggle to end apartheid remains an inspiration for millions of people. In November 2009, the United Nations announced that July 18th, Mandela's birthday, is to be known as Mandela Day. This day honors Mandela's contribution to freedom around the world. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others, Mandela says. Growing up, Nelson Mandela was born in the Transkei region of South Africa on July 18, 1918. His birth name was Rolihlahla. Nelson's father, Henry Gadila Mandela, was the chief of the local town. His mother, Nonkapi Nosikini, was the chief's third wife. Nelson was one of 13 children. When he was 9 years old, his father died. Nelson was the first member of his family to go to school. He first attended school at a local mission. In 1937, he moved to Helltown to attend high school. After graduation, Mandela began studying at the University of Fort Hare. This was a top school for Black Africans. Many students from Top Hare went on to play leading roles in the independence struggles of a number of African countries. At Fort Hare, Mandela met Oliver Tambo. The two became lifelong friends and colleagues. Get to know South Africa. The animal is the springbok. That's what it looks like. And the flag, it's almost like Jamaican's colors. It has purple, black, yellow, red, green, and white right here. And the bird is the blue crane. And I'm not sure if you can see it clearly, but that's the map of South Africa. The population of South Africa is about 49 million. The country has 11 official languages and several unofficial ones. In 2010, South Africa became the first African country to host the World Cup of Soccer. South Africa is south of the equator. The country has its summer when it is winter in North America. South Africa has many protected wildlife and marine areas, including Kruger National Park. Think about it. South Africa is home to many cultures and languages. How do you think growing up in South Africa affected Nelson Mandela's personal and political beliefs? Research the area where you live. How have the cultures of all the people living there enriched your part of the world? Mandela was given his English name when he started school. One of his teachers named him Nelson. Just a little fun fact. If you didn't know that. Practice makes perfect. During his first year at the University of Fort Hare, Mandela became involved in a student boycott. The students were protesting against the university's policies. As a result, Mandela was expelled from the university. He moved to Johannesburg. There, he completed his degree by correspondence through the University of South Africa. At the same time, Mandela was working as a clerk at a law firm. Mandela then studied law at the University of Witwatersrand. In 1944, he joined the ANC. In 1948, the National Party was elected to form the government of South Africa. This party began the policy of apartheid. By this time, Mandela had been elected as secretary to the youth leadership of the ANC. The ANC youth leadership, ANCYL, worked toward gaining citizenship and voting rights for all South Africans, regardless of race. After Mandela completed his schooling, he opened a law firm with Oliver Tambo. The firm provided low-cost legal services to Black people. And that's what Oliver Tambo looks like. Mandela became a main figure in the ANC. In 1952, he was arrested for protesting against apartheid. He also took part in a conference called the Congress of the People. In 1955, at this event, the Freedom Charter was adopted. Many of the charter's demands were written into the South African Constitution decades later. A little quick facts. One of Mandela's favorite pastimes is watching the sunset while listening to classical music. Mandela's birth name, Rolihlahla, means troublemaker. Oh yes, in Africa, by the way, all our names have a meaning, and we never name our children just plainly without any meanings. So just a little fun fact. Mandela was an avid boxer in his youth. During a peaceful protest in December 1956, Mandela and about 150 others were arrested and charged with treason. They were accused of trying to overthrow the South African government. Their legal fight became known as the treason trial. It lasted until 1961. All those who were arrested were set free. In 2007, Mandela was given a book of newspaper clippings from the treason trial. The woman who gave them to him was the daughter of the judge at the trial. And that's what she looks like. They didn't have any name for her, so I'm not sure who she is. But we can always research that later on together. few key facts. While the treason trial was taking place, the Shipville massacre occurred. Police opened fire on a crowd of people protesting South Africa's past laws. 69 people were killed and more than 180 were wounded. The Shipville massacre led to the banning of the ANC and other anti-apartheid groups. After shooting, the ANC founded a military group called Spear of the Nation. Mandela was named the group's commander. He had always supported nonviolent protest. However, he knew that a stronger stance had to be taken in the struggle for Black equality. He began campaigning against the government and military. Mandela also left the country illegally. He spoke at conferences and met with other African governments. When Mandela returned to South Africa, he was arrested for leaving the country and sentenced to 5 years in prison. At Shipville, the police attempted to disperse the protesters by flying jets lower over the crowd. When this failed, they opened fire. Thoughts from Mandela. Nelson Mandela is a champion for the rights and freedoms of people all over the world. Here are some of the statements he has made about his beliefs and the lessons he has learned in his fight for equality. Mandela refuses to be freed from prison if he has to support apartheid. Only free men can negotiate. Prisoners cannot enter into contracts. Mandela shows his respect for democracy. During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. Mandela speaks about the struggle that occurs when fighting for freedom. There is no easy walk to freedom anywhere, and many of us will have to pass through the valley of the shadow of death again and again before we reach the mountaintops of our desire. Mandela discusses the lessons he has learned about courage. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Nelson Mandela said that. Mandela states his views on racism. I detest racialism, whether it comes from a Black man or a white man. Mandela talks about how to make peace. If you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. Sweet. What was apartheid?
It's like
Okay. My son Francis will explain apartheid before I read it to you guys, all right? Come on, you have to come. This is Francis.
okay.
He's 12 years old.
What I learned at least, apartheid is basically where like whites and blacks. It's basically the South African version of segregation, and like how the white people had like a lot of better property, like and houses and beaches and stuff like that the black people couldn't use because they could get arrested and stuff like that.
Thank you. He's also down here reading with me, so that's why he thought I was asking him. But anyways, the definition of apartheid based on what this book wrote here, it means apartheid means apartness, like apart from each other. Pretty much what he said, segregation. In Afrikaans, it was a symbol of separating people by race. Apartheid was adopted by the South African government in 1948. It remained in place until 1994. Apartheid laws ensured white people had better treatment than black people. Pretty much like he said the segregation here in America during the civil rights movements. Pretty much what Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X fought against for us here in the US. Apartheid laws ensured white people had better treatment than black people in schools, hospitals, and other public services. Black people were forced from their homes because certain areas were for whites only. Black people had been denied the right to vote in 1936 in Africa. In 1959, many also lost their South African citizenship. They instead became citizens of one of the 10 homelands. These were areas where black people were forced to live. Black people had to carry a pass book if they traveled outside their homeland. The book had information, photographs, and fingerprints of the person, like a passport. Anti-apartheid supporters often call for the release of all the political prisoners in South Africa. A little Apartheid 101. Hendrik Verwoerd made many apartheid policies during the early 1950s as South Africa's Minister of Native Affairs. When Verwoerd became Prime Minister in 1958, he played a key role in changing the country's politics. Under his watch, the country became a republic. The African National Congress was banned. Nelson Mandela and other anti-apartheid activists were jailed. Hendrik Verwoerd was killed by an assassin in Cape Town, South Africa in 1966. Frederick Willem de Klerk. F.W. de Klerk was the last state president of South Africa in the apartheid period from 1989 to 1994. De Klerk was responsible for releasing Nelson Mandela from prison in 1990. This marked the beginning of the end of apartheid. De Klerk worked to make South Africa a place where all people had equal rights. De Klerk and Mandela shared the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. Pieter Willem Botha, P.W. Botha, became president of South Africa in 1978. He made small changes to the apartheid system. However, he failed to make the changes that were needed to truly change the country. He fell from power in 1989. Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu was the first Black South African Anglican Bishop of Cape Town. He became known around the world as one of the leading people against apartheid in the 1980s. Tutu was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1984. Mandela made Tutu chairman of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This group researched human rights during apartheid. Racism is the belief that a certain ethnic group is better than another. Many governments, including South Africa and the United States, have separated people by race at certain times. Some ethnic groups were denied certain rights or benefits. Influences. Martin Luther King Jr. was an African-American civil rights leader. He believed in nonviolent protest. King fought for African American civil rights in the United States in the 1950s and 1960s. Like Mandela, King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He received the award in 1964 for his work to end racial segregation and discrimination. King's work was similar to Mandela's work in South Africa. Mahatma Gandhi was a great influence on Mandela. Gandhi is known as the non-violent leader of India's fight for independence. He held protests and demonstrations against British rule from the 1920s until 1948. Gandhi's method of non-violent protest were known as Satyagraha. This means insistence on truth. Mahatma Gandhi lived in South Africa for 20 years. Many of his years were spent fighting discrimination. Mandela agreed with Gandhi's views on nonviolent protest. In January 2007, Mandela attended a conference in New Delhi, India. The event marked 100 years since Gandhi introduced Satyagraha to South Africa. Stephen Biko was a South African anti-apartheid activist in the 1960s and 1970s. He first became involved in politics as a student leader. Biko was the founder of the Black Consciousness Movement. This was a political movement that took place in the mid-1960s. It replaced the banned African National Congress. Biko died in police custody due to mistreatment. Following Biko's death, people gathered to protest the treatment he received while in custody. Overcoming obstacles. While serving his 5-year prison sentence, Mandela was charged with another crime. He was accused of treason for his role in planning campaigns against the government. This time, Mandela was sentenced to life in prison. Mandela was first held in a prison on Robben Island. It was located off the coast from Cape Town. Conditions in prison were harsh. Prisoners had a small cell with a thin mat for a bed and a bucket for a toilet. Prisoners received the least food. Political prisoners like Mandela had almost no rights. He was allowed just one visitor and one letter every 6 months. Mandela's prison cell was about 21.5 square foot. That's 2 square meters in size. Not that much. In 1982, Mandela was moved to Poolsmoor Prison on the South African mainland. Some people believed he held secret meetings there with the South African government. In 1985, South African President P.W. Botha offered to release Mandela from prison. Mandela had to promise to give up his fight against apartheid. He refused. While Mandela was in prison, he became known all over the world as South Africa's most important Black leader. People across the globe demanded his freedom. In 1988, Mandela was moved to Victor Verster prison. There, he lived in a private house. President F.W., the clerk, ordered his release in February 1990. When he left prison, Mandela and then wife, Winnie, saluted a cheering crowd of his supporters. Yes. That's how tiny his prison cell is. And this is them as they were living, and that's Winnie Mandela. And that's Nelson Mandela. I'm not sure if you can see it. But yeah. Achievements and successes. In 1990, the South African government took the first major steps to end apartheid. That year, the government removed the ban on anti-apartheid groups. This included the ANC. It also released Mandela from prison. Mandela then worked closely with President F.W. de Klerk to end apartheid in South Africa. In 1993, both men were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their work toward equal rights for all people in South Africa. In 1994, Mandela became the first Black president of South Africa. He was to serve a 5-year term. During his term, a new constitution was to be created for the country. And Nelson Mandela retired in 1999, but he did not stop working. He continued to work for a peaceful end to conflicts in other parts of Africa. Mandela has helped work toward HIV/AIDS awareness, as well as to improve South Africa's reputation around the world. He also helped South Africa secure the 2010 Soccer World Cup. Mandela retired from public life in 2004. He decided to spend more time with his family and friends. Today, millions of people around the world continue to be inspired by his efforts to create a free society. Invictus. The 2009 movie Invictus tells the story of an experience early in Mandela's presidency. The country was in the process of moving beyond apartheid. Mandela needed to find a cause that would join all South Africans. He believed the country's rugby team, the Springboks, could help achieve his goal, even though the team was not likely to win the World Cup. Mandela encouraged them to play hard for their country. The team worked hard and won the World Cup. The country came together in victory. Check out the movie Invictus. Morgan Freeman played the role of Nelson Mandela in the movie. Bam! Write a biography. A person's life story can be the subject of a book. This kind of book is called biography. Biographies include the lives of remarkable people, such as those who have achieved great success or have done important things to help others. These people may be alive today, or they may have lived many years ago. Reading a biography can help you learn more about a remarkable person. At school, you might be asked to write a biography. First, decide whom you want to write about. You can choose a political activist, such as Nelson Mandela, or any other person you find interesting. Then, find out if your library has any books about this person. Learn as much as you can about him or her. Write down the key events in the person's life. What was this person's childhood like? What has he or she accomplished? What are his or her goals? What makes this person special or unusual? A concept web is a useful research tool. Read the questions in the following concept web. Answer the questions in your notebook. Your answers will help you write your biography. For example, where does the individual currently reside? Does he or she have a family? That's adulthood. Your opinion. What did you learn from the books you read in your research? Would you suggest these books to others? Was anything missing from these books? Childhood. Where and when was this person born? Describe his or her parents, siblings, and friends. This person grew up in unusual circumstances. Help and obstacles. Did this individual have a positive attitude? Did he or she receive help from others? Teamwork. Did the person have a mentor? Did this person face any hardships? If so, how were the hardships overcome? Work and preparations. What was this person's education? What was his or her work experience? How does this person work? What is or what was the process he or she uses or used? Main accomplishments. What is this person's life's work? Has he or she received awards or recognition for accomplishments? How have this person's accomplishments served others? These are the kind of questions that you will need to answer when writing a biography for someone or even yourself. Nelson Mandela's timeline. In 1998, Nelson Mandela is born on July 18th. World events. World War I comes to an end on November 11, 1918, the same year he was born. All right. In 1952, Mandela is arrested for demonstrating against apartheid with other ANC members. Dwight D. Eisenhower is elected President of the United States. 1956, the treason trial begins and lasts until 1961. World events. Soviet troops stop anti-communist uprisings in Hungary. 1961, Mandela becomes head of spear of the nation. World events. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human in space and to orbit Earth. In 1964, Mandela is sentenced to life in prison. The U.S. Congress passes the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. This leads to an escalation of the war in Vietnam. 1990, President F.W. de Klerk releases Mandela from prison. Lech Walesa becomes president of Poland. 1999, Mandela becomes the first black president of South Africa on May 10, 1994. World events. The Channel Tunnel opens. It allows people to travel between England and France in just 35 minutes. Amazing. The end.